Hi, my name is Aaron, this is my show Reeducation, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Soviets and community councils. So, without any further ado, let's jump into it. Hopefully I was able to find some sort of interesting thumbnail or title to give this video, because usually when I talk about these sorts of concepts, those videos do horrible in the algorithm. So if I didn't, or even if I did, please share this around to your friends, family, co-workers, whoever you think would be interested in this sort of thing, so we get this thing out there a little bit further and spread these ideas. So with all that being said, now let's get into it. All power to the Soviets was probably a very common expression during the Russian Revolution in 1917 and 1918. But what exactly is a Soviet? Is it just some scary communist all dressed in leather coming down to shoot you in your village? Well, no, actually, it's not that at all. A Soviet is essentially a council. It could be a workers' council, or a soldiers' council, or even a municipal council, but essentially what a Soviet is a union. It's syndicalism. Groups of people in communities with common interests, goals, trades, abilities, or even living quarters will form unions together, coalitions, councils, and basically work to create union-style organizing that can be done on several different levels. Now, obviously, this was used back during the Russian Revolution, and it is an extremely useful method in seizing back the power that was originally stolen from us. The workers. Now, you might be asking yourself, Aaron, why exactly are you talking about this today? The Soviet Union is long dead, and all of the Soviets have dissolved. There's no need for any of this anymore. What are you even talking about? Well, actually, this is a major part of building dual power structures. Up until this point, we've been talking a lot about mass line. We've been talking a lot about building mutual aid community networks that can basically work to bring socialism to the people in a real way. But we also have to be thinking about things on a slightly larger level. We have to be thinking about how important it is to get all of these smaller organizations and groups really working together and functioning as essentially Soviets or councils within communities, within organizations, and within workplaces, so we can seize back the power that we should actually have. So we are going to talk a little bit about Soviets today, but we're going to talk about it in a more modern framework under the ideals of anarchism, because that's what we do here. So what is a Soviet? Well, essentially it's a union. How does it work? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Now, within these Soviets, now you can refer to these as councils, syndicates, or unions, but I'm just going to use the word Soviet. Within these Soviets, you want to make sure that the entire thing is organized horizontally. Within the past, that was actually one of the major reasons why the Soviet system ended up falling apart. It was because things didn't continue to be run completely democratically from a flattened hierarchical perspective. What happened was those Soviets, just like unions today, ended up having corrupted people being put into the leadership positions, and that basically dissolved the entire function of the Soviet and virtually made them nothing more than an arm of the government, which is exactly what unions do today under the capitalist system. So how do you make sure that your Soviet or your council stays democratic? Well, you have to make sure that you're voting on policy and not on people. You can have councils of individuals elected into positions where they can sign papers, organize workers, direct people to do certain things in certain ways, but those people have to be functioning solely and specifically off of ideas and rules and policy created by the people on the ground and not dictated from somebody on high. People that are put into positions of authority or power in these councils have to be immediately revocable, and the amount of authority and power that they actually have has to be limited to an extreme extent. So policy is come to through different methods of democracy, such as liquid democracy, direct democracy, vote weighing, and ranked choice voting, as well as any number of other things that we can come up with while we're doing a certain thing. Normally, whenever we're creating hierarchies, we're usually doing it in very specific contexts. So sometimes a hierarchy might be necessary to do something like building a house or erecting some sort of building of some kind. You're going to have laborers that are actually doing the work, but you're also going to have people that are more knowledgeable or have a better understanding of exactly what that building needs to look like at the end, and usually those people would be the ones that are directing all of the organization. But at the end of that building project, all of those people that were in positions of authority basically lose that position of authority because the project is completed. There's no reason to keep one person in a position of power because they were good at one thing and have that transfer over to a position of power in a completely separate, different thing entirely. So essentially it would form from the ground up with everybody having an equal vote and democratic say in how everything is run. And if any hierarchies do need to be formed, then they always must be temporary and constantly evaluated to see when or if they need to be dismantled or reorganized. These Soviets would also be intersectional. That is, that they wouldn't specifically be dealing with just labor unions or just tenants unions, but they would also have to do with a lot of other things as well. In a modern society, it's not just the workers that have all of the power. It's the people in general. And in fact, there are a lot of people that don't even work in production that would have to organize together so we could actually get out of the system what we need, what we put into it. So these unions would encompass everything from labor unions to tenants unions to organizational bodies that can rival that of the government, even to things like community defense organizations and groups that work to feed and house people. And not to mention organizations or unions of marginalized individuals that can actually work together to fight for civil rights and those sorts of things as well. It's what I like to consider a rainbow coalition of syndicates, so to speak. It's a great way to get all of these seemingly diverse and different groups together so we can actually all fight for a common cause. And the reason why we would do this in such a diverse way and not just individually having to deal with the workers' unions or tenants' unions or civil rights activists, why we would have a coalition of all of those together, is because there's a lot of overlap in every one of those places. All kinds of people are going to live in a municipality, and some people are going to work as plumbers, while others are going to work as drywallers, while others are going to work as waiters and waitresses, grocery store attendants, that sort of thing. But also on top of that, a lot of those people are also going to belong to different marginalized groups or different religious minorities, political ideologies. People are going to have a lot of different diverse things that all have to function together. So obviously we have to have a very diverse coalition of different groups working together as a strong, unified force against the hegemonic capitalistic power that currently holds us in bondage. And what exactly would this do, building all of these syndicates? Well, it would do a lot, actually. As far as the labor union is concerned, we already know that the collective bargaining power of all the workers together is strong against the boss. So bargaining power for the collective workers would be the goal of the workers' syndicates. But you would also have tenant syndicates that would be working to have collective bargaining power over the landlords. And then you would also be able to have municipal organizations that organize many people that live in the same area together. So then you would literally just have the physical strength of the masses to rival that of the government and even its monopoly on violence. You would be able to deal with that by having large groups or syndicates based around the ideas of community defense. And all of the religious minorities or ethnic minorities or gender minorities or racial minorities would be able to work separately and together to fight for their individual rights and their collective rights. Really, we should be fighting for all human rights, and that's how we need to be going about it. The labor unions need to be fighting alongside the tenants organizations. The tenants organizations need to be fighting alongside the municipal organizations, and all of those need to come together so we can fight for our rights and freedoms. That's how we create a modern, anarchistic Soviet. And the power that it would have at the end of the day would be unrivaled, because we would be focusing on all of these individual sectors and working together to better all of humanity in general. During the Russian Revolution, like I said, one of the main slogans was all power to the Soviets. And that's because the people together working in these coalitions were able to actually grasp onto real power and take it from the people that were holding it from them. The owning class, the capitalists, the landlords. These syndicates were able to work together to take back the land, to take back the factories, to actually create democratic, from the ground up organizations that took all of the power out of the hands of the elite class and put it directly into the hands of the masses. This is exactly what a syndicate or a Soviet is able to do if it has a broad-based coalition. It's able to focus on all of the different intricate moving parts of society and actually work to fix all of them together. Any one of these individual groups by itself would not be able to create a real lasting revolution. It would only ever create something that is hollow and would be easily taken control of. The strength of the Soviets gave every individual person in the entire country the ability to take back what they had built themselves from the people who stole it from them. But, unfortunately, it was open to corruption. And that's exactly what did happen. Because the people that were running these Soviets themselves didn't get to dictate what the laws and rules were over the entire country, all of a sudden, a lot of the people that were actually organizing these Soviets to be fully democratic somehow were deemed criminals. The leadership within the Soviets stopped being democratic and elected from the people, but instead were people that were installed by the Central Committee or the Pilot Bureau, the main part of the government that ran basically the entire Soviet Union from a central organization. Even though the Soviets were able to work together to take back the factories and the land from the capitalists and the landowners and set up actual worker cooperatives, those worker cooperatives were, for the most part, dismantled. And all of the democratic organization that allowed for that sort of flourishing of the people was stifled. They were actually able to work together to create the revolution and see it succeed by doing things like engaging in direct action, the general strike, and expropriating the land from the capitalists. Now, I'm not going to make a judgment call whether or not at the time that was the right thing to do. Honestly, I don't think that a lot of people really knew what the right thing to do was. Some people voiced their immediate criticism of this idea, but at the end of the day, it was what it was, and we can look back at that as a moment where we can learn from history and realize that the Soviets themselves were doing just fine without the Central Committee, without some central body trying to organize them. They had created the revolution themselves. They had worked to fight hard to maintain that revolution. But the second that those organizations stopped being democratic and the people who were fighting for it to be democratic all of a sudden were deemed criminals, then we end up with a situation where the revolution doesn't turn out exactly the way we wanted it. There have never been truer words than that the means that you use to obtain your object soon themselves become your object. And if the means that you use to obtain your revolution happen to be non-democratic, then your revolution will not be democratic. That's just, how it works. So like I was saying, the magic superpower of these Soviets, these syndicalist unions, these amazing groups of people that are able to fight for their freedom, their superpower is collective bargaining, but not only in one sphere, but in all spheres. Their power is collective organizing because they're actually able to work together to obtain the objects that they seek. We're able to have bargaining power against the employer, against the landlord, and even against the state itself. We would work together to give voice to marginalized groups no matter what they are, where they are, or what they might be. We would be able to create a real general strike and expropriate all of the goods and land and materials that were once stolen from us and bring it back into the hands of the people. It would allow us to dissolve the government's monopoly on violence and allow for the people to democratically organize themselves into groups that can nullify the state entirely. Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, that's fantastic and amazing, but how do we achieve such a thing? Well, we've already been working on it this entire time. Through these organizations that we've been talking about, through these mutual aid networks and community groups, through working to form labor unions and tenants unions, and groups that feed and clothe and house people, we're actually creating those systems right now. But we have to be focusing on them just a little bit more. Like I've said before, there are always going to be people that want to fight for specific ideas and goals. And we can work with those people as a collective unit, as a mosaic that actually fights on all the different levels and fronts that need to be fought on. So once we're able to create the organizations that do the fighting, Then we have to federate them together and work as a collective, unified body. So that's basically the goal from start till now, is to build these dual power structures, and we build them through mass line organizing, getting out into your neighborhood and talking to your family, talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors, your colleagues, your comrades, everybody that you can, and forming groups, getting out there and feeding people, clothing people, making sure you're teaching people in your community how to fight for defense, building worker cooperatives. All of these sorts of things work together so we can then federate them all and turn them into something that's really useful. A modern, anarchistic Soviet that can rival any state. It's a long way away, obviously. We have a lot of groundwork to build. Changing the world starts with changing how people view the world, changing thought. So we have to start changing that thought right now. We have to start building the world we want to see, and eventually we will be able to live in it. But we have to work for it. So yeah, that's the plan. At least how I look at it. If you do get a chance, check out all the links in the description box below. Hit the little bell button because they are not going to tell you when I release a new video. Make sure you're subscribed because they're unsubscribing people every single day. And terrifyingly, there have been a lot of people that have lost monetization on their entire channels over the last week or two within the leftist sphere. So I don't expect they're going to keep me around for very long. So if you do get a chance, please, 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 go to my Patreon, donate to that, because that's how I keep this show going. If I didn't have that, I would not be able to keep... If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to produce videos as frequently as I do now. So please, definitely... So please do that, and thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.